Hey, in this tutorial, I'll show you how to make this landscape in Figma using Generator. So let me delete everything. And we can start. So the main workhorse of this whole process is going to be the noise node. At first, I'm going to define 2 points, link their y's, and separate them to define some dimensions of what we're working with. And then, let's say 600. And then I'm going to create another point over here, which is going to be repeated. To move it, I'm going to use a range. So the x is going to be from this x to this x. And when I loop it, I have my points. The other thing I'm going to do is, well, at least for now, I want to raise them up to here. Now, along with these 5 points, I want to take also the bottom points. And so if these points are generated left to right, then to fill the shape, I need to then take this one and then this one. So the right one goes after and the left one goes last. When you automatically create a list from selected nodes, it takes their vertical position. So this is why I moved this one down a little bit. And so now I say combine, and now they're connected in the vertical position that they were in. I found that that's the easiest way to manage it. And so now this combine will go into a path. This is not what I want because it's smooth and I want it to be linear. What happened to my path? And also it needs to be closed. So now that I have this, let me add a stroke because that'll, I think, actually no, let's just go for a fill straight away, for a color even. So this is now my shape. Right now, as you can see, I've created a whole bunch of points and one path. So for instance, if I go over here and create 100 points, now it's very slow because I'm transferring 100 objects because points are not native objects in Figma and I'm simulating them with ellipses. So basically to show you 100 points, I need to show you 100 ellipses. So what we do is we just double click the path to only show the path, and this is going to be a lot faster. So now we need to alter the y of these points at the top. That means that we need to plug into this y noise. The reason we're not using random is that random doesn't have a scale parameter. So now it went down. That's because the y is inverted on computer, so we need to say that the max is -100. And then we can grow it like so for now. And so now we can really appreciate what noise is. This is a very basic noise, it's just a 1D Perlin noise. But unlike random, it has a scale. So another way to think of it is like a slow random. So it's a random that changes, and it has 2 crucial parameters. It has an offset. So what the offset is just kind of moves it along, because now that you've scaled it, you can then find the place in the noise that you want. And the other parameter, which is the more interesting one, is evolve. Now this is something I added only a few updates ago. And what it does is I'm going to slowly, actually, you know what, I'm going to set the number of points to 10, because then it can be done in basically real time. And I'm going to reduce the scale to, yeah, I think actually 1 is going to be fine. And then as I increase the evolve parameter, what happens is the whole graph slowly mutates and evolves in a random way also. So this is the way that you get interesting variations within the same noise, because with offset, all I can do is just move it along. But with evolve, I can actually get some different noise that's related to the previous noise, which is related to the previous noise and stuff like that. So you can get a lot of interesting patterns out of this. And it just so happens to very naturally link itself to making landscapes. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to go back to, I'll start with like 50 points. You can replicate this with more points if you want. I'm going to also hide the UI because we don't really need to see it, and so I can see the content better. So 50 points along the top, and now here in the noise, the minimum is 0, the maximum is 314, so they're negative, but I'm just not going to say it every time. So now if I raise the minimum, I get something like this. And if I increase the scale, let me add a decimal place so that I can work with it a bit more flexibly. So let's say something like this. I'm seeing sharp edges. I'm going to go to 80 points. Right. And increase the scale. Something like this. And also I can add detail with this detail parameter. That's a feature of Perlin noise, which gives me more interesting and more varied shapes within the same sort of region of noise. And so if I increase this a little bit further, I get even more interesting terrain. Actually, you know what? I'm going to go to 100 points. It doesn't matter that it's going to be a bit slower. And another thing I can do is I can vary the scale of things with another noise. So let's say I take another noise, plug it into the scale. Now right now it's a little bit messed up because the scale of this noise is 1. So if I now scale this up to something like 20, what we're going to get is that sometimes the noise will be low and sometimes it'll be really high. Now this is a little bit too low for my liking, so I'm going to set the minimum of this secondary noise to 10. So now that's a much more interesting landscape with some boring parts and some exciting parts. Now we need to repeat this, and we need to repeat this while lowering the top edge. So let's do that. First of all, I'm going to repeat this path. But since I'm repeating stuff that's already repeated, that looks like some kind of a building. I'm going to have to now start looping things explicitly to not get confused. So I have this range and these two noises. All of these are going to be looped through a combine to this repeat. All right, so now what's happening, I'll bring back the UI. I have my 5 repeated paths over here, but they're all the same because I looped all this stuff, and so now it's actually being controlled. Before it was just giving out random values all the time. So this is a little bit more clear. Now I'm repeating this, and so what I want to do first is change the Y of the top edge, and I'm going to do that by moving the min and the max. So what I want to do is I want to be able to control the variation. I will do that by having a central value. Let's say here the central value is -225. And I want to control the spread. So I'm going to have the spread be like 80 by default. I will, using the math node, this math node, have one edge which is a plus and one edge which is a minus. I will minus these, and I will plus these. And then both of them, let's do 225. I don't want to keep using negative coordinates, so I will then just over here in functions say negative, and I will copy it for over here. This negative goes into the minimum, and this negative goes into the maximum. And so now what's happening is that I have my coordinate of all of this, and I have the spread. Let me reduce the number of points so that we can quickly see how this works, and also the scale. And now I can see what I've done. So let's say this is 0. So this is the top separation. And this is the top Y. So now as I increase this, the amount of separation increases, and as I move this, the height of the separation increases. So now I can bring this back up to, let's say 100. That's nice. I'm going to increase, oh, I plugged this scale into this scale. When did it become unplugged? And I have a landscape. Let me get some seeds. That's interesting. So now I can play around with how all this stuff is. So something like that. Okay. And now I'm actually working with 5 of them at the same time. So let me progress their colors a little bit so that we can see that they're different. So I'm going to take a range because I want to control it. I'm going to plug this into the V. And then I need to plug this into this combine, because it also needs to be looped to the outer repeat. There we go. They're all there, and they all have a different value. but I need to progress their Y now. To do that, I need to plug a sequence into this. Not a sequence again, a range, because I want to control it. So I will say that it starts at, so the back is like, let's say 300 and the front is 100 because I want the front to be lower. And then I plug this into this combine. And also I need to actually plug it into the top Y. So now we have a set of repeating landscapes, and this is where the evolve parameter will come in, because now I can change how much this evolves. So let me get a range. I will say that the evolve will go from 0 to, let us actually say 0 for now, 0.0, so we get some precision in the control. I will plug it into the evolve. And I will plug this into the combine to loop it again with the outer loop. All right, so right now the evolve is at 0 and nothing is changing. If I increase the end value of the evolve, you can see that things are now starting to happen. So the top isn't really moving. Let me actually set this to 0 so we can see how it changes faster. So here's 1. Here's 2, here's 3, and so on. I think the problem here is that the separation is too big, so we can always go back and reduce it. Also, it can be controlled with a range or a sequence or something like that. So right now, I'm going to set a background color. Let's say this is going to be my background color. Oh, first of all, I need to put this into a frame. So I'm going to get a frame. Here's my frame. I need to now move it. So I set the position to absolute. I say that the Y will be something like minus, let's do minus 600. I like those square pictures. And the width will be, we can get the width automatically from the second Y over here, or from the second X over here. So from the 2 points that define the initial width. And so I take that and I plug that into the width of the frame. I set the height to 600. I plug these objects into the frame and I just double click the frame to only activate the frame. There we go. So now they're inside a frame. Now I can take, do I have a color? I do. I can take this color, plug it into the style of the frame. And so now I have my basic structure of the landscape. Let me get rid of the UI again. Bring this over here. The other thing I need to do now is to vary the color of each of these. So they will start with the color of the background, and they will end with a color that I choose. So let me duplicate this color, I'll randomize it. So now I need to figure out how I'm going to interpolate the colors, and I want to choose the color space in which I do this. So the way I'm going to do it is I'm going to choose a color space of origin, let's say HSV. I'm going to copy it to this to lock them. And then I will have a color that will be my result. And that is the color that's going to go into my landscape. So now I need to get this color from these colors. The way I do that is I interpolate their values separately. I will bring in a number interpolate node. In fact, I will bring in 3 of them. And I'm just going to plug in each pair of values, so the 2 hues, the 2 saturations, and the 2 values. And then I plug the results of these into the hue, saturation, and value of the result color. Right now they're all set to 50%. So what I want to do is take 3 ranges. Surprise, surprise. I'm going to put them over here. I'm I'm going to plug each of them into the value, the interpolate value. And then I will also plug all three of them. You know what, I can just combine them and then plug that into here, which is the outer loop. They're a little bit out of place in the graph. It should be like this. Not really. It should be like this, I guess. Or maybe this should be over here. Like that. And so now I plug this color into here. So I have my basic structure of the landscape finished. I can delete this, I can delete this. The only thing is we're missing one because it's the same color as the background. So what we can do is we can just set it automatically. So the start, the V in this case, will start at 19%. And there you go, it's now a little bit more visible. And then I'll also set this to 20%. Actually, no, you know what, 5% I think is fine because for some scenes, the very last mountain is a lot better if it's just barely visible. And then I'll set this to 5%. So something like that, you see? And now I can play around with these colors. So if I select them and Shift R, so a lot of this is not exactly landscape quality. That's because I've randomized everything. To randomize these in a little more controlled way, because I don't want to randomize everything. For example, I want the value to stay, to be defined by me. So the top value will be bright and the bottom value will be darker. And that looks a bit more like a landscape. I'm going to randomize this with nodes. So the hue will go from 0 to 360. And it will be the same hue for both the top and the bottom color. It's not as interesting visually, but at least it's predictable for this tutorial. It needs to be cached. It doesn't really, it can just be looped with the outer loop. So let's just do that. So this is randomized, and then I need another random for the saturation. Of one, and another random for the saturation of the other. And then the values, I'm gonna, well, I can actually randomize the values as well. I'll just set their ranges to something very different. So something like this. This then goes to this V, and this then goes to this V. Okay, first of all, this is 0 to 100 max, not 360 because it's saturation. And this also. So that's just to start with. But actually, I want to have the saturation. Oh, wait a minute. And now I'm going to take all of these, because now it's just randomizing them all over the place. I'm going to combine them. And then I will plug them into this same combine for the outer loop. And this means that they will only be processed again for each new mountain. So now I need to define these extremes. So let's say that the background random will go from, it needs to be bright. So the value will be from, let's say 80 to 100, we can change it later. And then the front will be dark. So let's say 0 to 20, just as like extremes so that we can fix them as we go along. There we go, this is better. And now we can do the same thing for saturation. Let's say the back saturation is always less, so 0 to 20. And the front saturation is going to be 50 to 100 because that can give us all kinds of different values. Now let me randomize these a little bit. Now actually this random should not be plugged into here. It doesn't need to be looped. What it needs to be is cached because I don't actually want it to change. So I'm going to do this. And so now until the cache node gets pinged by a repeat, the random value won't change. But since it won't, because I'm not connecting it to a repeat, it'll stay the same. So as I do Control A and then Shift R to randomize everything, the hue will always be random, but the same for all of the different layers of mountain. This is basically it. The only other thing I still need to add is the sun. Because I want to keep this tutorial brief, you can experiment with, you can actually experiment with a lot of stuff. So for instance, you can increase the number of steps in this repeat. It'll take longer to calculate, but you get a lot of interesting stuff. So this is definitely interesting, but it's not exactly what we want. Let's see what is going on. I think what is going on is that all of these also need to be cached because they're being used through all of these dotted connections more times than they need to be used. So actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to go like this, and for each of them I'm going to add a cache, holding Control every time while I create it. This is going to take forever, so I'm going to set the number of repeats to 5. Yeah, that's a bit better. And a cache for this. And a cache for this. Again, I'm holding Control every time to insert it into the existing chain. And a cache for this. So I think if I now increase the number of repeats to, let's do it to 20. So it's faster, but we can still see if it changes. Nope, didn't fix anything. So let's see why that is. I think these don't need to be plugged in. Okay, none of this is necessary. That's why this is happening. Because every time it's pulling a new value, but it really shouldn't. It needs to be decided randomly once and then left alone for the rest of the generation. All right, see, so that's a lot more correct. So let me just repeat the example with 50 shades, but at the same time, I'm also going to increase how much the evolve changes. So I'll do it from 0 to 10. And also I will just Shift R everything to get a completely new distribution of values. All right, so you can see that the effect is a lot more gradual, and then the more steps you have, the more you can play with all the interesting things that noise can give you, and then you can vary all the parameters with the noise and so on. You can vary things like noise can vary a noise, which varies a noise. So let me bring this back to 5 so that we can manage it with some decent speed. There we go. And let me randomize it a little more so that it looks a bit better for introducing a sun. So I feel like it's not really evolving as much as it should. These are quite the same. So let me increase this to 20. I guess that's a bit better. Maybe the scale needs to be increased as well to something like, from 10 to 100, 10 to 200. I feel like I need another sequence to increase this evolve of this secondary noise. So I will add I will set the add to 0.1, I mean, I'll set the add to 1, whatever, and I'll just evolve it like so. That's a lot more interesting. Let me loop it to the outer repeat. Yeah, that's a little more correct. And I like that they're all a lot more different now. So I think I can bring back the scale to something like 10 to 50, not to 100. There we go. And so now we get something that's a little bit better as far as landscape quality. Like obviously you can work with this still quite a bit, but it's already something. This is not very saturated. Let me try again. All right, I like this. I don't like the colors. I'm going over here to see if I can get a different hue. All right, that's pretty cool. So this is going to be my picture with that little peak at the back. And now I'm going to add a sun. I could have a circle with a glow, like a white drop shadow, but I prefer to use a gradient because then I can control the amount of glowing of the sun more precisely at the start and the end. So let's do that. I will take a gradient node. I will plug, I need 4 color stops. So I need the middle of the sun, I need the edge of the sun, I then need the adjacent start of the glow, and then I need the end of the glow. So that's 4 colors and 4 color stops. So let me prepare the 4 color stops. In fact, the easiest way to do this is to copy them like this, select all 4, and just control gradient them, like so. So that's my gradient for the back. So this is the first part. Okay, I'm going to set it to linear, to radial, I mean. I'm going to set it to white for now. And these will be black, but we can play with this later. I will set this as the frame's background, like so. And you can't see anything because the positions haven't been defined. So I'm going to say that the middle of the sun, or the edge of the sun, is at like 10%. The start of the glow is at 11%. And the end of the glow is at 100%, like so. So this is the sun. I'm going to, first of all, position this manually to see if I can fix it. Let's bring it up a little higher. So the start of the glow is also going to be white. There you go. But it can't be exactly white. It needs to be a little darker. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to bring in 4 fill nodes, because with fill I can control the opacity. Actually, not 4 fill nodes, just 1 fill node. And that's going to be here. So I'm going to set the color to white for now. I'm going to connect the fill to here. This is also going to be white. The opacity will be 0%. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to overlay this with the background color. So if this is going to be my background color, then I'm going to select this. I'm going to shift select this, and I'm going to control combine them. And then I will plug this into the frame's style. And so what I did is I first put a color that is generated randomly, and then on top of that I put the sun. And I'm then changing the visibility of the glow with the fill. So now if I reduce the opacity of this color stop, I get a more realistic glow. Let me play around with this a little bit. And also I don't get why. Oh, right. It's just that the sun isn't very sharp. So I need to increase the sharpness of the sun by, I'm going to add a control to the size of the sun, to the radius. And this is going to be sun radius. I'm going to make it like, whatever, 17 to start with. And then to add it to this will be a tiny, tiny delta, like so. Let's say 0.01, so that this edge is as sharp as possible. So then this position, the radius, goes into here, and this goes into, this goes into here. This is the end of the sun, the edge of the sun, and then this is the beginning of the glow. And if you don't like that, if you want the sun to be blurrier, then you can of course increase the delta over here and make the sun more washed out. So something like that. In this case, I'm going to keep it sharp, but I will increase its brightness like this by increasing the opacity of the start of the glow. It's, you know, a perceived brightness. So there we go. Now we have a scene with a bright glowing sun, some mountains. This can also be randomized. So we can take a random node from 0 to 100, which is exactly what we need, and another one by alt dragging, and then I'll just plug this into the X, and I will plug this into the Y. So now you're going to get the sun at a random position. Now if I Control A and Shift R everything, we're going to get a new scene. I feel like the sun is very big. Let me make the radius 6 or something. It can also obviously be randomized. And I think I need to set the size to 50% in the gradient node itself. So now let's see. Let me get 10 layers to this. That's actually pretty cool, but I need more separation between them visually. So I will put okay, this is the top separation, and the top Y goes from 300 to 100. So I'm going to put it from 500 to 0. That's not great. I'm going to put it from 400 to 50. Okay, that's better, but you know what I want to do? I want to increase the scale of the mountains. So the scale will be from 10 to, let's go back to 100. But then I also want to squish them down a little bit so that there's fewer of them at the top and more of them at the bottom. To do that, I can use a bias node. So I'm going to go in here in the number menu, get a bias node, and then run this value from the range of the top Y into the top Y through the bias node. And also, I need to plug the start into the min and the end into the max for the bias to work correctly. And then if I set the bias to something like 50%, that's a lot more like what I want, but I think I'm going to bring it back to 25%. And since there's a lot of variation, you know what? I'm going to increase the scale range all the way from 10 to 200. All right, I think that's better. And now let me get some randomized. That's cool. But they're a little bit too active in the front. So now we can add another range to control the separation, the top separation. And I say that the top separation will go from 31 to, well, not 0, but like 10, to make it a lot more chill down at the bottom. And I plug this into the outer loop. So let me randomize this a bit. That's kind of cool. I think I'm going to increase the rear separation to 100. And I also want to play with the secondary noise because I don't like... I think I'm going to set its scale to something like 40. That's better. I think I'm going to stop here. I like this a lot. I don't like what's happening here, but again, this is all random. You can change it however you want. You can alter all the parameters, vary all the parameters. A noise can vary, a noise can vary, a noise, and so on. So this is the end of this tutorial. As always, if you find Generator useful, if you like the work that I'm doing and you'd like to support me, the best way to do that is to buy a Generator subscription. That's less than $1 a day, and it'll let me keep making all the cool stuff that I'm making, which hopefully also you find interesting. Thanks for watching.